strong.
Chapter 331, King Yu. College, the entrance to the ancient and ancient world. When Ye Fuxian and the rest of his life returned, Ye Wuchen, Liu Shenyu and others had already arrived, waiting for him here. Where is His Majesty King Liu? Ye Fuxian asked. Father King escorted us and returned to the Liu kingdom. Liu Feiyang said that he has some hatred in his heart this time, but it is the father of the king, and he is also very clear as a king and the father of a country. To take into account the clan, even Zizi is not the only one and Shenyu. But because of their relationship with Ye Fuxian, the father only entrusted it to Ye Fuxian. All the others were in a more dangerous situation than them. Ye Fuxian nodded, sighing in his heart. Fuxian. At this time, Ye Wuchen spoke and Ye Fuxian looked at him, only listening to Ye Fuxian. Help me take care of the drowning fish. Ye Fuxian raised an eyebrow and looked at Ye Wuchen. You can't go back to Fuyun Janzong now. If Fuyun Janzong is the seventh peak, maybe nothing will happen, but in the Liu King Palace, he also saw a loose attitude. Ye Wuchen is dangerous to return to Fuyun Janzong. In order to clean up relations, Fuyun Jianzong most likely chose to sacrifice Ye Wuchen to hand him over to the Qin dynasty. Liu Shenyu's beautiful eyes also looked at Ye Wuchen. She took his hand and didn't want him to leave. Janzi, you stay in the academy temporarily. I will return to Master Mengming Feng first. If there is news, I will come back to tell you. The strong man accompanying the seventh peak Fuyun Janzong said. Ye Wuchen looked to the other side, groaned for a moment, then nodded gently, and said, Okay, if you have been ordered by Master, please come and tell me. King Yuan was killed by him, he wanted to go back and explain to Master. Okay. The group arched their hands at Ye Fuxian, and then left. Watching the people leave, Ye Fuxian said to Ye Wuchen and others, let's go up the mountain first. After all, walking towards the thatched hut, many academies in the surrounding area looked at them with doubts. Is this what happened? Seeing Ye Fuxian and the rest of his life taking Ye Wuchen and Liu Shenyu with them, the lodge students would consciously realize that something might have happened. Ye Fuxian went to the Liu kingdom because of a proposal from the Qin dynasty. Otherwise, won't take Ye Wuchen and the others straight up the mountain. Ye Fuxian found the second sister directly. They also came here at Luo Fan's snowy night. Zhu Gehui stood in front of the hut, his eyes fell on the passerby, and asked, what happened to the little master? Brother, Ye Fuxian shouted, and then said roughly what happened to Liu Guo. That said, the Qin dynasty's proposal was only prepared, not for the sake of a proposal. Zhu Hui and the intelligent people immediately guessed many things, and his beautiful eyes showed coldness. Is the Qin dynasty acting so naughty? Luo Fan also showed a very unpleasant expression when he heard it. This was an obvious way to provoke war, and he would fight Liu Guo. To provoke discord, at the expense of a prince. This so-called prince is too pitiful to remind, does not seem to be drowned out by the Qin king as Ramod, and has no status at all, otherwise, even if the main messengers of this matter are Qin Yu and Qin Li, dare to be so impudent. Sister, Liu Guo, is there any hope? Although Ye Fuxian was a bit pessimistic, he still had a hint of coincidence. Zhu Hui shook his head. The Qin dynasty has sacrificed a prince, it seems that it will destroy Liu Guo. If I guess correctly, I am afraid that the Qin dynasty army has landed in the Liu kingdom at this time. Due to being well prepared, naturally Liu Guo would not be given a chance, and no respite would be given. Liu Feiyang and Liu Shenyu were in despair when they heard what Zhu Hui had to say. Liu Feiyang clenched his fists, his eyes were red, and Ye Wuchen could feel that Liu Shenyu's palms were definitely tighter, and sweat. You stay in the academy with peace of mind, no one can come here to take you away. Zhu Gehui said to several people, secretly sighing in his heart, Liu Guo is afraid that it will end soon. Qin dynasty, this is to provoke war in the east. He naturally understood that the ultimate goal of the Qin dynasty was the academy and thatched hut, and their existence was the biggest stop in the eastern wasteland under the Qin dynasty. Ellipsis ellipsis ellipsis. As Zhu Hui expected, since the Qin dynasty had long been prepared, it would naturally start at the fastest speed. King Li also returned from the ancient desert and entered the entrance of the ancient desert controlled by the Liu kingdom. This was already known when King Liu entered the ancient desert. At this moment, a terrifying scene appeared in the sky above King Liu's palace. One dragon head floated above the royal palace, making the sound of the dragon groaning. The breath was terrible. Behind this demon dragon, there was a series of figures. The Qin dynasty went straight to the dragon army. In the middle direction, there is a real dragon, which is golden in color, as if thrown by gold, and the sharp claws are extremely sharp. Behind this golden dragon, King Yu's figure stands above him. He wore purple dragon robe, was chased by a robe, and danced with the wind. His black hair flew and his eyes were extremely cold. At this moment, King Yu is not the gentle prince of the Qin dynasty who is in the original Song city, but is full of incomparable domineering style. He was the prince of the Qin dynasty, and the future king of Qin would also be the king of the eastern lands. Inside and outside the palace, countless eyes fell on Jinlong's back, looking at King Yu, the prince of the Qin dynasty. Jiyu Dongyu and Lu Nanshan fought in the former city of Choge. East is the center of attention. Everyone in the world sighed that they had become one of the pinnacles of the eastern wasteland. Everyone admired their strength and couldn't live forever. As if King Yu didn't have a strong sense of existence, it felt like it was about to be thrown away. But at this moment King Yu stood in the sky, and the talent really realized that King Yu, who was as famous as Lu Nanshan and Jiyu Dongyu, was one of the strongest evildoers in the eastern wasteland at that time. People of all influences went to watch. What it means? This means that the king of Qin has recognized King Yu's ability to take over his position. At this time, at this moment, people finally realized that they would see a different King Yu, the immortal prince of Qin. Father King. At this time, King Li came to the side and said, King Liu has dismissed the people from King Liu's family. Liu Guo personally escorted Liu Shenyu and Ye Wuchen. They should have gone to the academy. King Ji. King Yu shouted, a handsome figure came out and came to King Yu. He was also a prince of the Qin dynasty, ranked third and talented. Bring some people to the academy and have them hand over the people who killed your uncle, as well as Liu Gyu. King Yudav. Okay. King Ji nodded, then he left with the party and left. Even in the academy, he couldn't step in to protect the people who killed his Qin dynasty prince. Uncle, King Yu shouted again. An old man came out and said, Prince. Leave after Liu escaped from life or death, King Yu said. Yes. The old man from the Qin dynasty waved his hand, and the dragon suddenly roared, and an army of dragons followed him, chasing and killing those who left Liu Guo in different directions. King Yu looked down, and said coldly, my uncle came to Liu Guo to propose, but was brutally killed in King Liu's palace, killed by King Liu's family and others. Today, my Qin dynasty officially attacked Liu Guo. Declared war, except Wang Liu's descendants, who are willing to surrender to the Qin dynasty who will not kill. King Yu's voice swept, sweeping the vast space, and inside and outside the palace, many people trembled. King Yu did not give Liu Guo a chance to justify and declare war directly. I have persuaded King Liu for a long time, but Wang Liu didn't listen to me and made a big mistake. At this time, a voice came out from below, and King Kang's figure rose into the air, and said, I want to follow the Qin dynasty. Okay. King Yu nodded, and then many figures vacated one after another, even some royal figures, who previously supported Liu Shenyu's marriage to the Qin dynasty. A bunch of dogs and mice walking, someone scolded angrily. Kang, you are so shameless, begging for mercy. Open the Zuawu array. A cold voice came out, and then saw a beautiful woman with a phoenix and phoenix crown standing on top of the palace. He looked cold, staring at King Yu in the void. His voice fell, and the entire palace lit up brightly, and a terrifying aura rose to the sky. A huge aura of emptiness was born between the heavens and the earth around him, all rushing into the palace. The majestic palace, the enormous basalt tortoise, appeared in the sky above the palace. This is a very defensive array, which has spared time for the aura of the heavens and the earth. After the willow tree, King Yu stared at the peerless figure towards the sky, indifferently said, King Liu will bet on the fate of the Liu kingdom for the sake of his beloved concubine's children. Will Liu Hao still want to fight for him? King Yu, although you are as famous as Jiyu Dongyu, but based on your character, I am afraid that you will never be worthy of being compared to Jiyu Dongyu. Liu Hu looked at King Yudav. Is that true? King Yu looked cold. Take you to Qin Palace, His Majesty King Liu will give it to you. In other words, King Yu's great dragon power appeared in his hand, a golden dragon weapon appeared in his hand, and the mighty Lingshan power bloomed from the dragon gun. When King Yu's spear pointed at the sky, the wind moved above the sky, like heaven and earth. Disaster, the real dragon spirit seems to be resurrected, roaring and roaring around King Yu's body, surrounded by Kowloon, and strong. This, inside and outside the palace, countless eyes stared at King Yu's figure in the void. At this moment, he was like a war god. I'm better than Jiyu Dongyu. King Yu looked indifferent. Today, he sacrificed his ancestral weapons and witnessed the rise of the Qin dynasty with the blood of King Liu's family. Today, he wanted the world to see the majesty of the Qin dynasty. The Qin dynasty needed not only victory, but also a shocking battle to tell all the top powers in the eastern wasteland. The Qin dynasty that once dominated the world is back. Chapter 332, Stonebreaker. King Yu's spear pointed at the basalt matrix, and a real dragon roared. He sat down and danced with the golden dragon, swooped down, and went straight to the Liu King palace. King Yu seems to be bathed in golden gods, and the golden light that sweeps across the sky is like golden lightning. The dragon weapon pierced the basalt array. At this moment, it seemed that there was a real dragon tearing wildly towards the array, and the tip of the dragon gun pierced into the circle slightly, and at the same time, a strike path enveloped the entire array. Above the dazzling basalt array, the giant golden dragon claw pierced into it, and the French array gradually cracked. The people in the palace looked at the scene in front of them, their hearts trembled. Above their heads, a huge golden dragon phantom appeared on the spear. After the willow, the basalt formation was carved by the turtle fairy. Only attacks above the prince level can be used to break it. King Yu, like Lu Nanshan, understands the power of sage, and uses the sage level device method. The prince character next to Liu Hu said, Hu Liu, Liu Guo is in danger. At the sage level, it was no longer possible to keep up with quantity. Clicking sounds came out one after another, and the cracks of the basal matrix increased. Finally, with a loud bang, the huge array collapsed and shattered. Do you want me to do it later? King Yu Shen looked like electricity, looking at Liu Hu. Why is it necessary to kill the Qin dynasty? At this time, a long voice came. In the distance, the old turtle came to the side. His movements seemed to be slow, but appeared in King Yu in the blink of an eye. Previously, King Yu has released the Qin dynasty's people, why do you have to force him to do that? The turtle fairy spoke to King Yu, saying that he had concluded the end, and the Qin dynasty destroyed the Liu from the country. The development of the event had finally reached this step. I heard that although the turtle fairy is not talented enough to be a sage, but has lived countless years, but has also realized the meaning of a sage, and happened to learn something today. King Yu's eyes looked to the turtle fairy, this willow totem monster, he is natural. However, now that he not only understands the meaning of sage, but also controls the weapon of sage, what is there to be afraid of? Okay. The turtle fairy nodded gently, her body suddenly enlarged, becoming bigger and bigger, and gradually, she looked like a supernatural turtle incarnation, and her huge body was twice as big as a golden dragon. Above the royal palace, lifting the front paw, the turtle fairy patted towards King Yu. King Yu was naturally not afraid, holding the golden spear to kill each other. At this moment, he felt that the palm that the turtle fairy slapped was not only a palm, but also the weight of the heavens and the earth, like the sky falling and oppressing, inside and outside the palace. Countless figures, feel the breath, really feel the suffocation, it is not an attack to kill them. Bang! The attacks of the two collided together, King Yu's body shot back, but was shocked to the ground, smashed the hall, dust flew, and the blood of the turtle palm appeared. The golden lightning exploded, King Yu returned to the void, looked at the turtle fairy, and smiled, that is indeed the totem of Liu Guo, but today, the totem will be destroyed and Liu Guo will no longer exist. Kill. King Yu's words fell, and the dragon army and its mounted golden dragon killed towards the sky, while he himself killed the fairy turtle. A great battle ensued. In an instant, King Liu's palace was engulfed in flames, and the luxurious golden halls collapsed and were destroyed, and the powerful people of the palace continued to die. Many people were killed in this slain dragon army. With the extremely powerful magical prince instruments, once filled with holy breath, it was as if they were all very ancient magical weapons. Liu Guo's people watched the outbreak of this world war from afar. Liu Hu's brilliance was very strong, and he killed several powerful princes, but the golden dragon ensnared him, and several people at the same time the prince besieged, and gradually became unsupported. Her white dress was stained with snow, and her beautiful face showed a feeling of sadness. Even though the tortoise fairy's strength was extremely tyrannical, King Yu didn't hit it and surrounded the tortoise fairy's huge body to keep attacking. Little by little, the tortoise fairy's huge body had more and more scars. Slow, this is his weakness, King Yu grabs this point and attacks wildly. You want to go? The turtle fairy lowered her head and asked Liu Hu and the others. In front of Liu Hu's body, the golden dragon breathes and the prince surrounds him. The long skirt moved with the wind, and Liu Hu shook his head and said, I won't die if I fight for Liu. Because of that, his figure flashed, and he continued to struggle, and the turtle fairy sighed. Liu Hu continued to be severely hit, and immediately landed on the ground again. The white clothes were stained with blood, the corners of his mouth were stained with blood, and the blood stained the glory. Direct. King Liu looked at Liu Haodao. Reiki gathered and turned into a blood-colored sword. Liu Hu swept his neck without hesitation. Blood flew in the sky, and Liu Haomi's eyes looked up at the sky, as if he had returned to his youth. He closed his eyes with a smile. This is a nation and he will not die. Ellipsis ellipsis ellipsis. In the ancient world, the Liu King who was rushing backwards stopped suddenly. He stretched out his palm, and the jade ring on his finger gradually faded and lost its original color. His eyes were bloodshot, and he looked up at the sky sadly. Is it really fast? He was almost waiting for her to come back. He let go of King Li, and he had a glimmer of hope. If the Qin dynasty was still talking about humane rules, he shouldn't have killed them all. However, the Qin dynasty seemed to care more about their goals, by any means. King Liu did not move forward, did not go to Liu Guo, but firmly turned around and said, "Follow me." Several strong people around him followed King Liu, and their party was very fast, galloping in the ancient world. Several strong people saw them and exclaimed in their hearts that the direction King Liu was heading was not Liu Guo, but the Qin dynasty residence. The Qin dynasty, like other top-level powers, controls the entrance to the ancient world by itself, and the other end is in the palace. At this time, there are people who are constantly active in the Qin dynasty palace. They are all very excited. Now they are officially at war with Liu. Next they will destroy Liu, block the eastern wasteland, and let the peak forces completely surrender until unite. Donghang, restore glory to the ancestors. At this time, many people came to the entrance of the ancient world and were preparing to strengthen Liu Guo, but at this time, a figure came out from the door of the ancient realm, and the strong people who came over came and looked at them. The human is a prince in the Qin dynasty who stands in the way of the ancient world. But at this moment, he was already bleeding. Quickly inform the Qin king. He shouted, and many people trembled. The next moment, a majestic figure walked out of the gate of the ancient world, revealing a terrifying thought. Behind him, there were several people, each of whom raised a throwing body and threw it to the side. King Liu. Their hearts trembled violently. King Liu did not even stay in the Liu kingdom, but killed the Qin dynasty. Is this crazy? Go. They responded very quickly, turned around and wanted to leave, but seeing the howling wind, King Liu's figure flashed, dominating Ling Tian. A big foot appeared, withdrew, the storm staring into the void. He looked horrified. No. Someone roared, a loud explosion, and King Liu's legs fell, and the people were crushed directly to be crushed. At this time, King Liu was full of endless killing intent, and continued to walk into the Qin palace. Since him releasing King Li is still not enough for the Qin dynasty to stay at the forefront, he still has to kill all of them, so let's kill him happily. If he wanted to die, if Liu Guo disappeared, then he would also bear his anger. King Liu kills all the way, the place he walks, no grass is born, no matter who he is, there is no forgiveness, and Liu Hu's death really woke him up. As for other things, he didn't want to think about it. Today is destined to be a day of serenity. To the eastern region, this could be described as a thunderstorm. King Liu, holding a sage weapon, realized the meaning of sage, came to the Qin dynasty, and fought against Liu Guo to tame the tortoise and the tortoise for several hours. He consumed the turtle with an oil lamp and suffered serious injuries. However, the legion led by King Liu overthrew the fragmented Liu kingdom and razed the palace to the ground. On this day, Wang Liu was furious and was killed at any cost, regardless of life and death. He entered the Qin palace and was killed in the darkness. Many people from the royal families in the Qin dynasty died, even some princes and some princesses were killed until King Khan's shot. At that time, he still avoided the frontal battle and continued to kill madly. In his eyes, he only killed. Finally, Wang Liu died in Qin palace. The hegemon generation has since disappeared. One party supreme power, dynasty change. Donghang shook, and the stone was shocked. The Qin dynasty's strength shocked Donghang, but the Qin dynasty's arrogance ignored its enemies, and it also paid a heavy price. King Kang temporarily took over the repair of the Liu kingdom and pursued the remaining evil of the Liu kingdom, but everyone knew that some of the surrendered people of the Liu kingdom, such as Kang Wang, were nothing more than runaway dogs from the Qin dynasty. Today, the Liu kingdom has survived in name. At the same time, the Qin dynasty, the three princes of the Qin dynasty, led a group to Shushan. At this moment, outside the mountain of books, in the void, King Ji and his group were strong and stood in the air. They are here to let the hut pass. Liu Shenyu and Liu Feiyang are the remnants of Liu Guo. Ye Wuchen is even more murderous to kill Qin Yuan. Naturally, they would come to ask people. Even though they will fail basically, at least they will show your attitude. Thatched huts, what are the qualifications and reasons to protect these people? At this time, above the hut, Jujhui heard that the Qin dynasty came to ask people, and said to Luo Fan, are they idiots? Possible. Luo Fan shrugged, maybe they think that although it is not enough to let the hut, but at least take a word, and deal with the hut later, there is a reason. Just like dealing with Liu Guo. Zhu Jui's tone was indifferent, and Liu Guo's affairs were already known to Kotang, as he had expected. Possible. Luo Fan nodded. Go and tell your 3 brothers, they are too noisy for me to practice. Zhu Jui said softly. Luowen blinked. So it's all gone. Zhu Jui said lazily. Luo Fan's eyes brightened slightly. Second sister is second sister. Chapter 333, when thatched huts make no sense outside Shushan, Qin Ji and other strong people are still waiting for a reply from the hut. In front of them, many strong men in the academy had arrived, staring at the people from the Qin dynasty. They all knew what happened to Liu Guo. Even though the academy had nothing to do with Liu Guo, Liu Guo's fall still made the people in the academy extremely angry. The anger of the academy was different from Ye Fusion's anger. They didn't know Liu Guo's people, and it didn't matter. They were angry about the cruelty of the Qin dynasty, and they had followed the rules of the Eastern Wasteland for many years. The 3 major powers in the middle area of the Eastern Wasteland, the Qin dynasty, Donghazong, and the academy, are the strongest and top-tier powers, and the other powers are second-rate. This pattern has been maintained for many years. Even though there were occasional minor frictions between the disciples, they still followed the latent rule of not being trampled on by anyone. The world of martial arts has always been cruel, there are often big forces oppressing weak and small forces, and bullying will also exist forever. The balance is lacking, breaking the pattern of obedience over the years. In addition, the Qin dynasty seems to be famous, but in fact everyone understands that Qin Yuan is just an excuse to start a war. Even if Qin Yuan did not die, the Qin dynasty would still find another reason to start a war. What's more, the destruction of Liu Guo was only the first step in the Qin dynasty's battle for hegemony. Go. The academy aristocrat, Zhu King, fell on the Qin dynasty, Qin Ji and others, and said a word. Qin Ji didn't care, looked at the people in the academy indifferently, and said coldly, the academy must protect the people who killed my uncle. Shouldn't he be cursed? Zhu King spoke indifferently, looking at Qin Ji. Qin Ji released a cold gleam, staring at the academy, my uncle died unjustly in Liu Guo. The current academy not only protects assassins, but also greatly insults the dead. I wrote it down in the Qin dynasty. Qin Ji naturally understood that it was difficult for him to get people. If the hut will give, then it will not be the hut, but Qin Yu still let it come. He doesn't need the hut, but at least one reason is needed for the future crusade against the college and the hut. Reason, random, can you come out now? Zhu King glanced at the others with disdain, and none of the princes of the Qin dynasty could get used to it. I also need to hear an answer from the thatched hut. Qin Ji stood proudly and spoke nonchalantly. What answer do you want to hear? In the distance, a voice came, and then saw a walking figure, hitting the white Zuexu, with long hair flying, handsome eyes with sharp meaning, staring at Qin Ji. His voice was gentle and indifferent, but it seemed to reveal an incomparable arrogance. A simple look seemed to pierce Qin Ji's eyes. Looking at Jiu Donglu's eyes, at this moment Qin Ji's proud heart has a wave of life, which seems a bit scary. As the 3 princes of the Qin dynasty, he was extremely talented and had always thought of himself very highly. He did not consider himself weaker than others, but when he actually faced Jiu Donglu, for some reason, his momentum seemed to be suppressed due to just one glance. Jiu Donglu, however, was as famous as Qin Yu and defeated Lu Nanshan's existence. In that battle, Lu Nanshan showed the meaning of a sage, comparable to the giants of the Eastern Wasteland, but still lost to Jiu Donglu, a second-rate prince. Ye Wuchen slaughtered my uncle, Liu Guiyu, Liu Feyang, and Liu Shenyu are also in the hut. I naturally hope that the hut can be delivered. Qin Ji said coldly, but the momentum between the words was not as strong as before. You quarreled with the practice. Jiu Donglu suddenly said something inexplicable, and both the Qin dynasty and the academy were stunned. Noisy for practice. Who's he? What do you mean? Qin Ji frowned, looking at Jiu Dongluo. Sin is unforgivable. Jiu Donglu again. Qin Ji opened his eyes and said leaked Jiu Donglu. Unforgivable. Even Shan Chang Juching from the academy looked at Jiu Donglu in amazement and confusion, but he vaguely knew who he was in Jiu Donglu's mouth. Straw disciple, Zhu Jui. I saw that at this time, Jiu Dongyu stepped forward, the scent of the breath came out of his body, there was no white wind, automatic, hunting. He glanced at the people of the Qin dynasty, his eyes suddenly became strange, and an invisible spiritual power instantly enveloped them all. Jiu Dongyu, what do you mean? Qin Ji asked. He came to ask the person in the hut, even if the hut did not deal with anyone, what reason was there for him? Could that be the reason that he was so noisy in his practice? Jiu Dongyu ignored Qin Ji, and took a step forward. Just for a moment, a very sharp spiritual will fall on the Qin dynasty strong people. The people of the Qin dynasty can't help but shake, Jiu Dongyu will shoot them. Even though the strong person who came with Qin Ji during this trip was built to be strong, how could he possibly ward off Jiu Dongyu's existence? Jiu Dongyu is now comparable to the Eastern Desolate Giant. Even if King Yu comes, without the help of a sage tool, his victory is between 5 and 5. If Jiu Dongyu really had to deal with them, there would be no tension at all. Jiu Dongyu, what do you really want? The two figures took a step forward, and their loud breath blossomed. But I saw that Jiu Dongyu's eyes became more and more strange, those handsome eyes were like a spirit vortex, the terrifying spirit was about to oppress them, and then Jiu Dongyu's palm stretched out, an invisible sword went crazy raging, surrounding the two prince powers. To kill. Jiu Dongyu clasped his palms, a terrifying airflow raged, a gurgling sound came out, the two prince figures screamed, and then they were bleeding, their bodies shook violently, and then the bodies were facing downwards. Fall down. Explosion. The Qin dynasty's body shivered violently, raised its head, and looked at Jiu Dongyu in horror. Are you crazy? Ye Wuchen killed Qin Yuan. The Qin dynasty came to take advantage of justice. What's more, they never clashed with the hut. Jiu Dongyu, even shoot directly to kill. Qin Ji stared blankly at Jiu Dongyu, what was the hut thinking? Are you going to declare war on the Qin dynasty? Qin Ji's face was very ugly, and there was a hint of fear. Jiu Dongyu said he wanted to kill. How many people must be killed? Where is he, Prince Qin? Already said, you interfered with his training, death. Jiu Dongyu said lightly, as if he didn't care, he killed as if he was not a prince, not a Qin dynasty person. The words fell, and the terrible spirituality would continue to erupt, covering other strong people. He seemed to be surrounded by ancient figures, like a strange halo covering the people of the Qin dynasty. Jiu Dongyu, are you crazy? The Qin dynasty prince roared. Jiu Dongyu continued to stretch out his hand as if he didn't hear his words, and shouted loudly, followed by shouts, the princes who couldn't bear the spiritual villain couldn't hold it in, and their eyes were horrified. Blood-stained liquid flowed, and bodies fell into the sky one after another. Just for a moment, Qin Ji, the three princes of the Qin dynasty, was still standing there. At this time, where Qin Ji came to ask about the momentum of the academy when he came, the outline of his face changed, his skin was blue, and his eyes were angry and very frightened. When the thatched hut students have no reason to kill, then it must be a disaster. Is it so sad to act in a thatched hut? Qin Ji shouted in a trembling voice, this is not thatched hut style. The people in the academy were surprisingly watching Jiu Dongyu at this time. Jiu Dongyu even killed directly, even if Shan Chang Shu King was trembling inside, he naturally understood the possible consequences of Jiu Dongyu doing so. At this moment Shu King remembered what Zhu Hui had said to him in the Zhao dynasty Song City, and the academy was acting too gently. Sure enough, he shouldn't be so gentle compared to that. Broken heart. Jiu Dongyu looked at Qin Ji's still dull eyes. The world knows that his hut is reasonable, so Qin Ji dares to come and ask him. But they don't know that the hut sometimes makes no sense. Everyone is destroying the whole family, and the evil has come so arrogant and asked me to ask someone. In this case, I must punish him and act for the sky. Jiu Dongyu's voice fell, and the whistle of the sword gas passed. The ancient character of the warrior surrounds Qin Ji's body. At this moment, Qin Ji's body shook violently, with deep fear. Now that the Qin dynasty has finally begun to fight for the world, he should find his own stage and cultivate his light. He came to the hut to ask someone. This would be his original appearance on the Donghang stage, but he never dreamed that this performance would be the last day in person. Kill. Jiu Dongyu let out a cold voice, his sword whistled past, Qin Ji's face was twisted, his body was shaking, desperate, his body was torn apart slightly, until it fell to ruin and turned into nothingness. Jiu Dongyu didn't go to see him again, turned around and walked towards Shu Shan as if he was just doing a trivial thing. Zhu Hui let Luo Fan preach to him, but only let him wipe out these people, but he killed them directly. Elimination and killing were no different for him, and he was still weak and kind. The Qing dynasty used this method to deal with the Liu kingdom, destroyed the Liu kingdom, intended to prevent the eastern desert, and came to the lodge to show its majesty. He also revealed the majesty of the Qing dynasty and told the world that he wanted to dominate the world. However, when was that thatched hut also Liu Guo treated the same way? Because he was destined for war, he became the Qing dynasty. Since the Qing dynasty didn't obey the rules of the eastern wilderness, then why wouldn't the thatched hut make sense? People from campus like Shu King watched Jiu Dongyu leave, his heart trembled, and he was silent for a while. It was as if today, they once again knew the hut and Jiu Dongyu. Cottage student, so handsome. A beautiful woman looked at Jiu Dongyu and said, "Those beautiful eyes are dim." Chapter 334, The tree wants to be still but the wind is silent. In the war between the Qing dynasty and the Liu kingdom, King Liu did not return to the Liu kingdom, but instead killed the Qing dynasty palace directly, causing great damage to the Qing dynasty. Of course, this battle did not really shake the foundation of the Qing dynasty, and really determined whether a force was strong or not. After all, it was still a peak combat power. For example, the hut only has a few disciples, but for the Qing dynasty, the threat from the hut is stronger than any force in the eastern wasteland. For no reason, the peak combat power is too strong, and one person can become a country. Currently in the eastern wasteland, what level can be called the pinnacle of eastern Vasteland's combat power? Naturally, it was an existence understanding the meaning of a sage, or a magic weapon with a sage level. The reason why the Qing dynasty dares to pursue the world is because now they have the conditions to mature, which are both no less, and the Donghazong alliance, the peak fighting strength of the two major powers combined with the details, they are enough to shake Donghang. The Qing dynasty and Donghazong agreed that after the world was decided, the Qing dynasty would rule the world and Donghazong would be the first in the eastern wasteland to control the world and practice the world together. Although King Liu's madness made the Qing dynasty pay a lot of money, it was nothing compared to Liu Guo's death, not to mention that many strong people in Liu Guo also surrendered. For today's Qing dynasty, he is just waiting for his arms to scream, and order the world to conquer the thatched huts, and settle in the east. At this time, in the luxurious palace of the Qing Palace, there are many top powers in the eastern wasteland. Qing dynasty Prince Qin Yugao sat on the first throne. Far above him, below him, Donghazong, Fuyun Jianzong, and Zuawangdian are all very numerous. Even the Ji family sent strong people to visit the Qing Palace. My Fuyun Jianzong originally wanted to take Ye Wuchen to the Qing dynasty, but so far Ye Wuchen has not returned, and he entered the hut with Ye Fusion. At this time, a strong man from Fuyun Jianzong said to King Liu. The Qing dynasty shot directly and destroyed Liu Guo, who was adjacent to Fuyun Jianzong. Can Fuyun Jianzong be afraid? King Yuan was killed by Fuyun Jianzong, and of course he had to explain to the door. Understand. King Liu said, I have ordered King Ji to go to the lodge to make dignity, but it is very likely that the cottage will act immorally, and most likely will not be handed over. At that time, what was Fuyun Jianzong thinking? Fuyun Jianzong is willing to go to the lodge with the Qing dynasty to negotiate with important people. The strong man Fuyun Jianzong said, besides, this is the matter of the Qing dynasty, how dare Kotang refuse to give up? That's right, with the Qing dynasty's prosperity today, thatched huts will naturally hand over people. After all, this matter has nothing to do with thatched huts. The Ji family also has strong praise. If the thatched hut dares to trample on the rules in the eastern wasteland so possible, all the troops in the eastern wasteland will respond. He Yulu, who was the lord of the 5 palaces and the Liu kingdom, was destroyed. Which power in the eastern wasteland doesn't tremble? Before Zuawangdian was connected with the Qing dynasty, now it is naturally closer. What's more, there is an old grudge between them and the thatched hut. At that time, I hope that you will support him more. King Yuan said with a smile, what was their goal in destroying Liu Guo? Isn't it just to completely expose the tyranny of his Qing dynasty to prevent the troops from the eastern region? Although powers like Fuyun Jianzong and Zuawangdian are now very close to them, in fact they still have their own ghosts, and only with absolute strength can they be feared and even afraid of the Qing dynasty. Not only these two forces, on the day of the Qing dynasty's defeat of the thatched hut, he will order all the powers in the world to join the army. Who wouldn't dare? At this time, there were footsteps outside the hall, who looked a little confused. Immediately, a figure appeared at the door of the hall, looked at King Liu, and bowed, Your Majesty. What is it? King Liu looked up and asked. Your Majesty. The man's mouth trembled, as if he couldn't stop talking, and glanced at the other troops. This is my own, and I have something to say, King Liu said. His Majesty the three princes' spiritual imprint is gone. The man buried his head very low and said, bowing. King Yu's body trembled slightly, and a sharp cold mang was released from his sharp eyes. He leaned forward, and there was a loud breath that seemed hard to suppress. You read it right? King Yu asked coldly. Your Majesty, it's not just the three princes, but the princes on the strip, all their spiritual marks are gone. The man buried his head lower, his voice trembling slightly. King Yu stood up, his eyes were extremely cold. King Ji and the people from the Qin dynasty that accompanied him were all crushed, which meant that he naturally knew what was going on. It was a declaration of war ahead. He didn't expect that the Hutt would dare to be so resolute, and kill King Ji directly. After all, until today, they had not actually declared war with the Lodge, but they just wanted to ask someone. Even if the Hutt doesn't change people, why kill people directly? Moreover, the prince of the Qin dynasty was killed. There is also a sharpness in the eyes of the powerful Yunzong sect. He naturally understood the meaning of the man's words, and went to the hut to ask the prince of Qin Ji, who was already dead. Yulu's eyes narrowed, she remembered the scene where her daughter was forced to die, and naturally, she was so arrogant, ignoring everything. Ji Jiaqiang's expression calmed down, and his heart trembled violently. The Qin dynasty who went to the lodge to be important were all killed. Was this the lodge's response to the Qin dynasty? What do you think? King Yu suppressed his anger and looked at the people present. Cottage is very arrogant, very unruly, the strong man Fu Yun Janzong said angrily. If the hut is not destroyed, the prince of Qin will die in vain. Yulu also said coldly, the Qin dynasty must immediately send troops to the hut. I wish the Qin dynasty great success, and make a lot of money. Ji Jiaqiang said with a bow. King Yu looked at the people, but the rhetoric at this time was not the same as before. Let's go back for now. I will discuss this with my father. The cottage will pay the price, King Yu said coldly, and everyone left. After they left, King Yu patted him on the chair with a palm, and the chair collapsed and shattered instantly, and his body showed a terrifying killing intent. The power of the thatched hut not only killed Qin Ji, but also made the main army even more terrifying. Now it is not easy for them to order it. Qin dynasty overthrew Liu Guo to show his own strength, showing the supremacy of the whole, but just because of Qin Jia's death, he was instantly shaken. If he had ordered the world before, many people would have responded to the Qin dynasty. But now, the Hutt directly killed the Qin dynasty prince. Did the Qin dynasty avenge the destruction of the lodge? Qin Yuan's death caused Liu Guo's destruction. The lodge did more than Liu Guo. Can the Qin dynasty start a war? The main force will now choose to wait and see. Ellipsis. Everything outside Shushan immediately spread to all the great powers in Donghang, and many people trembled inside. The Qin dynasty destroyed the Liu kingdom, and the three disciples of Jiyu Dongyu cut off Qin Ji. There seems to be a reason, but in fact there is no reason. For the first time, the two peak powers in the eastern wasteland collided in the truest sense for the first time. Previously, even if the second disciple Juge Hui in Choge City blasted the gates of the East Qin Academy, the Qin dynasty still persisted, and even helped Kotang to investigate the real killer Ye Fusion. The murder occurred in the Qin dynasty. Qin dynasty's tolerance is also justified. But this time. Go to war. The collapse of Liu Guo and the death of Qin Ji made the atmosphere in the eastern wasteland even more tense. Right now, many people were talking about what would happen if the arrogant Qin dynasty and the proud Academy Lodge collided with each other. In Shushan, the hut didn't seem to have changed in any way because of Qin Jia's death, and the hut remained as flat and silent as before. Liu Feiyang and Liu Shenyu officially train at the academy. Ye Wuchen was a disciple of Fuyun Janzong and devoted himself to sword practice. Today, they wanted to rely on practice to increase their strength. They were too weak in the face of the eastern wilderness. Only when it is strong enough and has a power field like Jiyu Dongyu, can it really be qualified to participate in the Donghang game. Brother and sister, will the Qin dynasty start a war? Ye Fusion asked everyone at the dining table. I do not know. Luo Fan shook his head. Whether the war is moderate or not, the Qin dynasty wants to use other forces in the east to dry up. I am afraid it will not be easy. Anyone who dares to participate in the war must be prepared to destroy it. Ye Fusion nodded, and the second teacher asked the third brother to abolish Qin Ji and others. At that time, he even thought that the second teacher was an impulsive act. However, he realized afterwards that the actions of the second and third sisters not only stemmed from anger, but were hindered. The Qin dynasty destroyed the Liu kingdom, and Bingfang pointed directly at the hut. At that moment, the lodge knew that this battle would come sooner or later. If so, why wait? killing King Ji. On the other hand, the people of other forces will be more afraid of the stubborn Hut and dare not ally with the Qin dynasty. What is the teacher doing? Ye Fuxian asked. In fact, he still didn't know the true strength of the Hut. The Hut masters, the second and third brothers, and the third brothers, plus the teacher were the main characters, but he only knew what level the three Jiu Dongyu brothers were. If you're not worried at all, it's definitely wrong. Since the Qin dynasty dared to pursue the world, it naturally had a strong spirit. What the little guy wants to do, practice well. In the future, Sister Shi will rely on you to protect him. Sister Shi glanced at Ye Fuxian with a smile. Ye Fuxian trembled with a smile, his heart was depressed, but he looked seriously at the second teacher. In the future, I must protect the second teacher. Okay, obey. Zhu Gehui reached out and rubbed Ye Fuxian's head. Ye Fuxian suddenly looked dull, his movements were stiff, and he couldn't laugh or cry. Is this an adult? Okay. I want to achieve the ideals of my master in Donghang in a gentle way, but it seems a bit difficult now. The second teacher sighed, the tree was calm and the wind never stopped. Chapter 335, Declaring War. There was a clash between the Qin dynasty and the thatched hut, and the east shook. Many people are watching, waiting for the Qin dynasty's next move. The three princes of the Qin dynasty, Qin Ji, who went to Kotang's high officials, were directly taken by Kotang. If the Qin dynasty did not do anything, the world would think that the Qin dynasty was not qualified to rule the East. As far as the world was concerned, news came from the Qin palace. The Qin dynasty officially announced the 7 deadly sins of thatched huts to the world's people. First, thatched huts acted arrogantly and killed innocently. Jiu Dongyu once destroyed a first-rate army in the eastern wasteland and was ruthless and innocent. Second, the Kotang disciples took the robbery. In Choge City, Ye Fuxian and the Kotang disciples snatched the Yinjia treasure from Choge City and released the 5-elemental wand and the magic tripod. Third, the students at the lodge want to do whatever they want. They forced He Zairo, daughter of the king of the 5 palaces, and still refused to surrender, forced to die, and Luo Fulin, a disciple of the king's palace and his father who hated Ye Fuxian, arrogant and cruel, exterminated dissidents. Fourth, the thatched hut protects the assassin, Ye Wuchen's shelter, ignores the opinions of the people in the floating cloud sword sect, and even kills the people who went to the Qin dynasty. There are as many sins as the 5th, 6th, and 7th, which are like straw huts. The Qin dynasty announced that they would send troops to the capital, conquer the thatched huts, and defend the eastern desert. In addition, the powerful forces of all parties are invited to gather in Qing City to discuss the big events in the eastern wasteland, and hope that the leaders of the various powers can attend and decide the future of the eastern wasteland. As soon as this news was circulated, it caused a commotion, and Donghang shook. Will the most powerful forces in the eastern wasteland finally collide with each other? Thatched hut, how to compete with the dragon army of the Qin dynasty. Not only that, the Qin dynasty invites all parties to gather in Qing City. I am afraid that they will want to use the troops from the eastern wasteland to jointly curse the hut. Of course, the Qin dynasty did not say it explicitly, but only said to discuss the big events in the east, but everyone knew it. The Qin dynasty has officially declared war on the thatched huts. Of course, all the troops could not refuse the Qin dynasty's invitation. Now that the Qin dynasty is so strong, it will easily crush Liu. Even if it does not advance and retreat with the Qin dynasty, it should at least give some face. What's more, who wants to witness the battle between the Qin dynasty and the straw peaks of the eastern wasteland? East is boiling. For a time, the strong men of the top forces descended the mountain, and many leaders in the helmets set off directly and rushed towards the direction of Qingkan City. They lead the mighty strong people, even if they will also roll over into this great change in the eastern wasteland. The thatched hut naturally got the news, but this seemed to be expected. Qin dynasty wants to dominate the world, and Jiu Dongyu kills Qin Ji directly, which is almost equivalent to declaring war. How could the Qin dynasty not respond? In the Qin dynasty, Fengjian Huihui, the eastern famine forces gathered for a while. Not only the peak forces, the mighty armies of all sides came, especially the armies that depended on the Qin dynasty. Soon, there was news in Qing City that the Fuyun Sword sect arrived, and even the Fuyun Sword sect master came with the leaders of several ancient peaks. Then, there was news that the strong man from the Suspense King Hall arrived, and the Lord of the 5 Spaces came in person. After that, giants such as the head of the Ji family, the master of the Taoist sect, the Lord of the Moon sect, and other giants came to the Qin dynasty. In the East Wasteland, there has never been such a prosperous period, and the giant personally attended the scene. This was naturally caused by the declaration of war between the Qin dynasty and Khotang. This incident had too much influence and would most likely determine the future direction of the Eastern Wasteland and affect the pattern of the Eastern Wasteland. What will happen in the future can even directly determine where they will go from here. In such a situation, even the giants had to be taken seriously. You see, not long ago, there was someone with the same name as them, the king of the Liu kingdom, fell in the Qin palace. This will be a huge change that has not occurred in the Eastern Wasteland for hundreds of years. In this change, the Qin dynasty and the thatched hut are the dominant players, and they will also participate in it to try to get the best benefit. At this time, somewhere in the Qin King city, the strong people in the suspended king temple were there, including several palace masters. The lord of the suspended king palace wore loose robes, black hair, and a strong temper all over his body. Hall master, what should I do if the Qin dynasty invites me to conquer the academy together? At this time, a strong man asked. After Qin Ji died, they speculated that the two major powers would likely break out in a war. Of course, it was impossible for them to stand on the side of the hut, but the question was, did they participate in the war? The Qin dynasty declared war in the first hut, declared the 7 deadly sins of the hut, and then gathered the Donghang army to invite Donghang to gather. This is really an old fox. If the Qin dynasty spoke, what should they do? What do you think? Asked the main hall. Yulu's eyes flashed. Naturally, he expected to go to war with the thatched hut, but at this moment he did not dare to say anything. Sure, we can't go to war so easily. At this moment, Chia Luo spoke. Chia Luo, what do you think? Asked the main hall. Chia Luo looked at her teacher and bowed and replied, the Qin dynasty and the thatched hut both have absolute arrogance. I am afraid that they all have the ambition to unite the East. After the destruction of the thatched cottage by the dynasty, it was the time when the Eastern Wasteland was unified. Naturally, we must obtain sufficient benefits to ensure that our future status in the Eastern Wasteland will not be shaken. You think Donghang is a trend? Asked the main hall. Yes, teacher, because the Qin dynasty can easily destroy Liu Guo, the other forces are the same, the peak combat strength gap is there. I am afraid that only the cottage academy can compete with the Qin dynasty. The situation is unstoppable. Our teacher can fight. www.mtlnovel.com only has more importance to protect status. After all, even if the Qin dynasty rules the East, as long as we don't directly control us, there isn't much difference. Chia Luo slowly spoke. The main hall's eyes flickered and his eyes narrowed. He naturally understood Chia Luo's words, but it was still difficult for him to accept it. What's more, do you want to fight for benefits and benefits without paying the price? This means that after all, we still have to fight for the Qin dynasty. In another palace, the Mizuki disciples were all present, and even the Mizuki kings came by themselves. At this time, a group of beautiful female eyes looked into the distance, and they were beautiful and extraordinary, especially the women led by them were like fairies. Don't eat fireworks on earth, give people a fairy-like feeling. Sovereign, Virgin Chuyan and Qin Li walked very close and had a love affair. Even when Liu Guo was destroyed, Chu Ye went to Liu Guo with Qin Li. I'm afraid we weren't at that time. Was it marked by the Qin dynasty? After all, a woman asked, Wang Wezong's girl has high status and the right to speak, and she can represent Wang Wezong outside. Fairy Wangu said nothing, and her beautiful eyes were full of meaning. Chu Li and Qin walked very close. They were already Qin Li's girlfriend, and another Tianzhao figure of Wang Wezong was the girlfriend of Khotang's disciple Ye Fuxian. This is a bit troublesome. How should I deal with the situation in the future? Not only them, but at this time, the giants of the Eastern Wasteland were thinking about a question. If the Qin dynasty ordered them to destroy the hut, what should they do? The Qin dynasty was so sinister that they declared war and actually summoned them to come. Chapter 336, Master Du's Ideal. The Qin King Palace Party, the meeting of the heroes in the Eastern Wasteland, the strongest in the world came, and the giant figures of all parties attended in person. Outside the Qin Palace, many people looked at the open Qin Palace, and at a glance, they were all strong. They lined up from outside the Qin Palace, all knowing that they had reached the center area of the party. There, King Qin and Prince Qin Yugao sat on the first throne. There were different camps in all directions. Each camp represented the main forces in the Eastern Wasteland. Behind them, there were many troops and camps. There were many first-rate troops in the Eastern Wasteland. They were similar to the Yin family in Choge city. They obeyed the Qin dynasty. Now they are also responding to the Qin dynasty's call. The party. In the camp to the right of the Qin king, a group of extremely outstanding temperament characters stood proudly, and any of them were extremely talented people. In the eastern wasteland, these people can be named. And at the forefront of this camp, there are two peerless beauties, beautiful and peerless, I don't know how many eyes are attracted. Keen Kunking, like a fairy under the earth, pure and flawless from her beautiful eyes, she seems to see no disturbance, clear and pure. And beside him, was also a stunning woman, a beautiful woman in the East Wasteland, Madame Yusio. Once Madame Yusio, also known as Fairy Yusio, was a beautiful woman famous in the Eastern Wasteland, then she was chased by the ruler of that time, the lord of the Dongba sect, currently Madame Yusio is Dong Hazong. Sovereign woman. I heard that Emperor Dongba was training in retreat and did not come alone, but no one dared to hate Madame Yuxio's weight, all that she had was not because she married Emperor Dongba. If suzerain had not married him, he would not have today's status. Many eyes looked at Madame Yusio, her status was as dignified as one that rarely appeared in front of people, but she has arrived today, it can be seen how important it is for the Qin dynasty to declare war on the thatched hut. Not only Madame Yusio came, but even Qiankyu Temple came with an extraordinary figure, a famous monk came with a Buddha and a group of monk disciples in Qiankyu Temple. In addition, Fuyun Janzong, Zuawangdian, Dezongzong, Wanguzong, and the Ji family also have an arrogant lineup, all of whom are in charge of steering. The endless crowd around them saw the appearance of these people, and sighed in their hearts, this is probably the deterrent power brought by Liu Gui. The Qin dynasty called for the world's great powers to gather, and there were many respondents. Although the peak forces did not say anything, it was still impossible to ignore the Qin dynasty and all present, and they were all heavyweights. One Qin dynasty easily overthrew the Liu kingdom, not to mention Dong Hazong, an ally of the Qin dynasty. The greatest power of the Eastern Wasteland, the strongest is the alliance of two of the three forces, and the deterrent can be imagined. The party that was as strong as the clouds was a bit noisy, and there was a constant clamor of opinions. At this time, Qin Yu's Prince Qin Yu, who was standing next to the Qin king, stood up and signaled that everyone was silent. The voices of discussion gradually disappeared and became smaller and smaller. Only those at the peak of power still communicated occasionally, and others no longer. Voice, you are lucky to have come from far away. King Wang glanced at the large crowd and said humbly, many strong archers said, King Wang is polite. I won't say much if you are polite. The situation in the Eastern Wasteland today should be clear to everyone. My Qin dynasty sent a strong man to Liu Guo to raise his relatives. My son Qin Yuan wants to marry Liu Guo's princess Liu Shenyu. Wife, I don't want to find a poisonous hand in King Liu's palace. My child died tragically elsewhere. Every time I think about it, I feel a painful heartache. Liu Guo is cruel and innocent. When she was a concubine, many people in Liu Guo the prices. After all, the culprits Liu Shenyu, Liu Feiyang and Ye Wuchen's killer are Artis, and no one has punished them, and the hut has protected these assassins. King Wang said angrily, even for this reason, King Ji, who killed me and asked for his son, is very talented, but desperately. The war between the kingdoms is not beheaded, and the cottage is desperate to do whatever he wants, and his 7 deadly sins must all princes have heard and remembered the fact that such a power should not exist in the east of our country for a long time. I invite you to come today to discuss this matter. What do you think about this? The eyes of power flickered, each with a mind of its own. Cottage is indeed rampant and ignores the invisible rules of the eastern lands. My Fuyun Janzong officially announces that he has expelled Ye Wuchen from his ancestor and left it to His Majesty to dispose of him. I don't have to worry about Fuyun Janzong. At this time, the ruler of Fuyun Janzong stated that the eyes of many people were flashing, which was also the expected ending. However, Fuyun Janzong did not promise to send troops with the Qin dynasty. This was very risky. The thatched hut directly cut Qin Ji, can all the troops not be afraid? Every arrogance and courage is based on strong self-confidence, and self-confidence naturally comes from strength. The bravery and strong self-confidence of the lodge made them feel very worried. The king paid attention to the Union Sword sovereign, of course, although he asked all the troops to come today, in fact, each of them had their own ideas. Obviously, he wasn't going to make a decision because of his few words. In recent years, the lodge has really done too much, especially this time when the Qin Ja's assassination of the Qin dynasty must go to seek justice. The owner of the suspense King Hall opened his mouth and replied without any pain or itching. As for forces like Wang Wezong in the Ji family, they watched quietly, but didn't answer. Let's wait and watch the changes. The situation in the Eastern Wasteland was coming, and neither of them knew what would happen. What is the master thinking? At this time, the king looked at the monk in the Qiankyu temple. He wore cricket, with beads in his hands and around his neck. At this time, he held the Buddha by his neck and closed him. He spat out an indistinct Buddhist voice in his eyes, shook his head gently, and did not respond to King Wang's words. The King swept away everyone, but he really didn't see a rabbit or an eagle. In recent years, the thatched hut has continued to swell, and has the potential to threaten the entire eastern wasteland. If we continue to do so for a few years, I am afraid that it will become the world of thatched huts. At that time, I will not kill my son. That it all depends on the hut's thinking. The King of Keen said lightly, saying, so, I want to end this situation and summon all the kings to create a common era. As his words fell, space became quieter. King of Keen. Will this prepare for a fight with Donghang? Create an era. How old are you? King Keen wants to unify the eastern desert. In the direction of the Demon sect, the Demon sovereign's eyes were sharp and he looked towards the King. This is a question that everyone wants to ask. No, I want to change Donghang, with the princes, because I don't want to see you, like the Qing dynasty, disappear into the long river of history in the Donghang region. King Wang said, is lost. Wangu Zong and Fairy Wangu looked at the King and said, has your majesty been exaggerating? Even though the hut has an aggressive style, it doesn't seem to have any ambition to dominate the world. Do the fairies realize why the lodge has such a bad relationship with the academy? The King looked at the moon elf. Why? Mochizuki said. This is a very secret thing, even me, I only know one or two of them. King Wang said lightly, because the Dean of the Academy and Mr. Du of Kotang have different ideas. At that time, the great master of the thatched hut, Sword Saint, was arrogant. Everyone was famous in the First World War, and everyone seemed to have seen the glory of the Academy, and a super character was born. But at this time, Sword Master asked Du if he should stay in at the time of Shushan. Master Du let him go down the mountain and stand on his own. The Academy has a thatched hut. Even now, if you want to become the first gate of the Eastern Wasteland, it will be easy. When the students of the Academy are strong enough, what will be the Academy at that time? Who can dominate the world? Even if it is an academy, the Academy wants to become a totem in the Eastern Wasteland, but Master Du does not follow the Academy's will, but does what he wants to do. Is the structure too low-key and lacks ambition? The prince looked at the crowd, seriously said, on the contrary, because Master Cao Du's layout and ambition is greater than the Dean of the Academy. One day, the great disciple Kotang opened the sacred mountain, the second disciple, and the third disciple. When the disciples and even the four disciples went down the mountain to create a one-sided army, at that time, the entire empty land in the east was all thatched huts, and there was nothing else for the other army. If there is one day, you ask yourself how talented you are compared to the Sword Saint, compared to Jiu Dongyu. At that time, the students of the lodge started to overturn their foundations. Did anyone join the army where you are? The lodge did not even need to fight, it is only time. Rainfall is enough to become a symbol of Donghang. At that time, no one will remember Dezong and Wangu, until they completely disappear from the long river of history. This is the idea of Cao Du, his ideal, said the King, staring at the mighty. They knew that what King Wang said was most likely a fact. When that day came, the hut needed no fighting at all. Thatched huts can be absolute sanctuaries in the Eastern Wasteland. And even when they wanted to fight back, they wouldn't be able to compete with those lodge students. Chapter 337, is the situation already in place? The King looked at the power of thinking, knowing that their hearts were slightly shaken. It is not easy to convince these people to send troops to destroy the hut together with the Qing dynasty. Even if Fuyun Janzong and Zuawang Hall were close to them, they still didn't want to directly face such an enemy. A faction has its own selfishness. Only when the lodge really threatens their existence can these people decide to move out. What he is telling everyone now is that the threat from the Qing dynasty to them is much lower than the hut, otherwise why would these people follow the Qing dynasty to destroy the hut? In the era when the Qing dynasty was the leader of the Eastern Wasteland, all the forces in the world coexisted, and the Zongmen continued to develop in an orderly manner. The dynasty ruled the world, but it did not interfere with the existence of the Zongmen. The same will happen in the future. In the world, I must share with you everything today. Donghazong and I joined forces to form the Dongqing Academy, also for the world's practitioners. The structure of the future will not change much now. King Wang continued to persuade, even now, my Qing dynasty has found the tomb of our ancestors, and there are many ancient books in it. Therefore, even the non-exclusive studies of my Qing dynasty, they are placed in the East Qing Academy for disciples to practice when we together create an era. What's more, my Qing dynasty will never bless itself, but hope that all forces will develop together and become strong. Unlike the power of the hut, when the power of the sacred mountain of the sword spreads throughout the eastern wasteland, there will be no ground for your existence. Everyone's eyes flickered, and their hearts became heavier. Of course, the Qin dynasty had to be buried by its ancestors, and its strength would definitely increase. Moreover, it was already said that the Qin dynasty would be revived. Your Majesty is right. The lodge now has no power in its eyes. It is very proud and full of vision. What about the future? An elder of the Yin family from Choge city resounded. Fu Kotang's disciples said a word. I am afraid that Donghang will tremble. Many people echoed, but the peak forces were still silent. Will the Qin dynasty really be what Qin says? How could they easily trust each other so easily? Liu Guo's crushing was a living example. It really made the Qin dynasty dominate the east, and what will happen at that time, who knows? Now both the academies and the Qin dynasty's powerhouses had thrown him away, and the one top-tier power he faced was bound to end up like Liu Guo. This is also the most difficult problem facing the troops right now. The strength is weak, but the Qin dynasty has shown the ambition of uniting the East, and they are in danger whether they stand up or not. Don't stand in line now. If the Qin dynasty wins, how about accounting for the fall? Isn't that another Liu country? What if you Q? Now, no one knows the true details of the Qin dynasty and the academy's thatched hut. The Qin dynasty's spirit came from its own strength. Cooperating with Donghazong in digging the graves of the ancestors, the thatched cottage entertainment is mysterious. No one knew the thatched hut so far. Is Mr. Do understand the practice? At what level? I know that you still have some worries, worrying about the words of the king without faith, but you can rest assured that, as long as you are willing to form an alliance with my Qin dynasty to conquer the hut, I will take you to the ancestral grave, washed by the ancestors, Bing. In fact, I want to take a blood oath with the princes in front of the ancestors. The goal of my Qin dynasty is only to restore the glory of our ancestors, not my only ambition. Qin Wang said in a loud voice, and his voice fell. Many people's hearts trembled slightly, their eyes were sharp and their hearts were a little emotional. Only real interest can move people's hearts. Sooner or later, the eastern wasteland will come together. They have no way of controlling the trends of the times. Since the era of the Qin dynasty to destroy the Liu kingdom and the cottage to destroy Qin Ji, the situation of the eastern wasteland has become straight from its former subtlety. It can erupt at any time, and the pace of time accelerates. Moving forward, nothing can stop this burst of momentum. Before Qin Wang had talked about the threat of the thatched hut, at this time, he mentioned the baptism of the sage and the army of the sage, how they couldn't move. Teacher, if you want to lead in the future, you must first gain trust. The relationship between Zuawangdian and the thatched hut cannot be repaired, unless you send the Lord of the Five Spaces to the thatched hut. At this time, the direction of Zuawangdian, Chia Luo, the main disciple in the main hall of the suspended king palace, preached to his master. The king of the king's palace blinked, knowing that his disciple was telling the truth, but for the king of the king's palace, it was clearly impossible to tie the five-space god to a thatched hut. Teacher, it's time to make a decision. There is a difference between the former being identified and the latter being identified. If all of us can receive the baptism of the sage and the sage warrior, we will not stand in the future. Donghang, what we should think about now is to maximize the benefits. Chia Luo continued to persuade her teacher when she saw that her teacher was still hesitating. The lord of the hall naturally understood that his disciples were telling the truth, and glanced at the people from other forces. He communicated with other lords of the rings, and five-hall Lord Hiyulu naturally supported him. That straw hut acted rashly, forcing me to kill my disciple king of the king's palace. I have long been annoyed and unhappy in this case, but not as good as others. I can only endure it. I am happy to join the Qin dynasty army and send troops to fight it. The main voice of the suspended king's palace fell, and there was still silence around it. Did the peak forces finally make a decision? Everyone knew that as soon as his words fell, the hanging king hall began to completely bond with the Qin dynasty's chariot. The Qin, Donghazong, and Zuawangdian dynasties are the three powers. Qin Wang's eyes showed a dazzling edge, and finally, a power declared his position. He knew that what the Qin dynasty lacked was such an introduction, and the position of Lord of the Deferred King's palace was enough to shake the psychological defenses of other great powers giants. The general situation has been reached, you need to climb into the tank. Thinking of this, he inadvertently glanced at Chia Luo, who was sitting behind the main body of the king of the suspension palace. His real surname was Chia Luo of the Qin dynasty. After so many years of cultivating in King Zuan's palace, wasn't it just waiting for this moment? Help his brother Qin Yu. Chia Luo was also very excited at this time, but she was still patient. He was naturally very good at hiding his emotions when he was sent to the palace of the suspended kings. He had never shown any affinity for the Qin dynasty in his many years in the palace of the suspended kings. Almost no contact. It was not until Choge City that the Qin dynasty's plans began to be implemented, and now at this critical moment, he finally played a role. He was very clear that what all the current giant armies were lacking was a hint, and he played this role well, tilting the balance of Lord King Palace Lord. Well, if there is a master of the hall, my Qin dynasty, Dong Hazong in the palace of the suspension king will be able to do great things. Who else is willing to cooperate to create a new era? King Wang said. I will swear to follow your majesty, said the people from the Yin family in Choge City. Follow his majesty's straw hut cultivation. One by one the voices formed the grand trend. Those who follow the Qin dynasty naturally know when to do so. The suspended king palace nodded, and it was time for the other forces to feel this. The torrent is unstoppable. At this time, all the top forces were hit by this wave, and they felt a little pressure. The head of the Sword Sovereign Fuyun blinked, and then he also said, I also want to follow the Qin dynasty. Okay, with Union Janzong joining, Hichu's big goal can't be achieved. King Wang laughed. Congratulations, Your Majesty, you must curse the hut, and you will be in the east. The voice was louder and stronger. Dao Dezong, the Ji family, and Wang Wezong were sitting in their respective positions, watching the situation in front of them, sighing inwardly. Although Kotang's strength is unknown today, under such a general situation, the academy and Kotang are afraid to fight back. Even if Master Duo of Kotang understands cultivation, he must not be better than the dean of the academy. Qin and Donghazong dynasty's top figures simply compete. In the Qin palace, the terrifying torrent that sounded like waves continued to spread outwards towards the outside of the Qin palace. Endless people in the distance seemed to feel the power of this torrent, and their hearts trembled. A new era is coming. Will the academy and thatched huts be demolished soon? At this moment, outside the Qin palace, among the mighty crowd, a black figure appeared. The man had an ordinary appearance, wore a black robe, and moved with the wind. He had long black hair, in that ordinary face. On the other hand, he had a pair of eyes that were as deep as stars, making the ordinary ones unusual. In the waves of mountains and tsunamis, he took peaceful steps and walked step by step towards the palace. Every now and then, someone's eyes fell on him, and he felt a temper radiate from him. Her appearance was so ordinary, why did it seem so hard to get rid of her gaze? This feeling is like, the moment you look at him, you know that he is not at all like his face, but a very extraordinary person. This figure quickly walked into the palace and walked towards the Qin palace. Who is your majesty? The guard outside the Qin palace asked the man when he saw him. He ignored her, and still walked into the palace, with a faint power spreading from him. Seeing this scene, a guard stepped forward and said, Stop. He didn't seem to hear it. He still walked forward, and the guard let him go on purpose, but the next moment, the moment the black man took a step, an invisible stream of air flowed, and for a moment, the space around him was like as if frozen. The guards stood still like statues. Just watch the black figure walking past them and walking towards the palace. The guards moved quickly, only feeling sweat all over their faces, with terrible expressions on their faces. Such a terrifying character. Just now they had a feeling, as if they were moving, they would be broken and crushed. Chapter 338, Fragile. In the mountain tsunami, the black figure continued to move forward step by step, and the breath on his body came out a little. In the surrounding direction, many people looked at him, revealing strange looks. The man in black looks very ordinary, but his eyes are deep and his eyebrows are slightly different, like a crescent moon and a machete. Several people in the Qin dynasty frowned and blinked. When they came to him, someone said, Who? The black figure still ignored, and continued to move forward. A spreading breath enveloped the people in front of them. For a moment, those people trembled and their pupils contracted violently. At this moment, they felt like they were in a terrifying space, an invisible aura, seeming to tear his body apart at any moment. The man in black walked into the middle of the party step by step as if he was in a state of no one, and the steps gradually moved upwards, into the void, and each step rose upwards. Gradually, more and more people noticed his existence, and many people looked at him and raised their eyebrows. The king of Qin summoned the strongest people in the world to gather here. The top giant figures in the East Wasteland are in front. Who is the one who dares to be rude and step forward in the void? The Qin dynasty guards stepped towards him, but saw that the breath on him suddenly became extremely terrifying, and a sense of terror pervaded the man in black. For a moment, the vast space was like a terrifying aura was born, and those who wanted to stop it stiffened in the void, staring at the figure that was to come. Hum. The space made a sharp and loud sound, the invisible momentum enveloped the vast void, and the mountain tsunami wave was suppressed, the sound gradually weakened, and many people raised their heads somewhere in the void. A black figure that kept moving towards the center of the stage. When the aura was still getting stronger, the sound of the mountain tsunami continued to decrease, and the momentum gradually dissipated until it completely disappeared. Immediately, the space became silent and seemed a little strange. The appearance of a person suppressed the enthusiasm of the presence, the figure of the man in black stood proudly in the void, and now he turned into absolute focus, as if he was the only one in the King Palace. At the party, the big people looked at the people, their eyes froze for a moment, and their hearts trembled. The sovereign lord of the clouds sword cloud stood up and looked extremely cold. His eyes looked like sharp swords turning into scabbards, and he shot towards the person, the sharpest. King Keen invited Donghang to gather together. Why don't you invite me? The man stood in the void and said, his voice stiff and cold as stone. Master Kotang, I'm afraid I can't move. The King was still sitting there, staring at the blank black figure. Straw disciple, Saint Sword. He actually walked out of the western region of the eastern wasteland and came to the King Palace. The people of the top forces trembled inside, and no one would think about the appearance of the Sword Society, appearing at a party where the King Palace banquet Donghang Juqiang, which was crazy. Not long ago, King Ji died outside Shushan, and Dao Sheng came to the Qin dynasty alone. Is he really sure of his strength? The vast space around him was a dead silence. Not many people had seen the Blade Saint, so it wasn't until the King of Kun's words said that they knew who was coming. I heard that the Qin dynasty ordered Donghang to destroy the thatched hut. Why didn't he come? But Dao Sheng's mute voice seemed to contain an invisible power. No matter what Dao Sheng's cultivation is now, he is alone field, the entire Qin palace is suppressed. The King was still staring at Dao Sheng. He didn't speak, but King Yu took a step forward. He and Jiu Dongyu and Lu Nanshan were both famous figures. The Holy Sword became famous earlier and was more sensational. Sword Saint's fame was only one battle, but he challenged Fuyun Janzong. World War I sealed God. Now that it's been a long time since the war, what kind of world has the Blade Master Cao Sheng reached? Juan heard the name Kotang, a disciple, and wanted to learn something today. King Yu said, and there was a terrible war in him. Dao Sheng glanced at King Yu, and the next moment, the sky above the King Palace seemed to blow a terrible storm, raging through the heavens and the earth. There was a flood of Lingshan sword intent, and the sky wanted to split the sky. The endless sword intent condensed into a blade, floating above the sky. This knife straddled the sky and floated above people's heads. At this moment, everyone present felt the coercion of the apocalypse, as if the knife could be cut on themselves at any moment. Many people looked up to Swordmaster, especially those from the top forces. To what level is the Swordmaster today? Yes. The sword hanging above the sky was cut down. Without a word, the swordsman directly cut it. This knife looks like it has no skill and no magical power, as if it is only the purest and most primitive. This knife fell lightly, as if there was no power, as if the light was on, not even aiming at anyone, but only cutting in the center of the stage, where the party was being held. Nothing moved, and I don't know if it was because his knife was too fast, or because he knew that the target of his knife attack had no self. In short, no one refused the knife, let it cut, and divided it at the place where the party in the Qin Palace was being held. Right in the middle. Next, a thin crack appeared on the ground, extending all the way, moving in different directions like tree roots, extending wildly on the ground, spreading rapidly in different directions, and coming to the main force. The position appeared at their feet, and then stopped. The Lord Sovereign of the Clouds and Swords looked down at the very thin crack under his feet, as if there was a blade light seeping from it, but in that blade light beam, there seemed to be an incomparable sword meaning, as if it could be immortal. In the eyes and pupils of his eyes, he released a powerful sword, rushed into the gap, found a sword ray, and wanted to destroy it, but found that the sword could not be erased. Such a discovery made suzerain of Fuyunjian's body tremble slightly, and he naturally understood what it meant. This means that the meaning of the sage understood by the sword sanctuary has surpassed him, and the sword is above the will of his sword. The palace lord of the suspended King Palace also lowered his head and felt the score of his sword, his arm trembled slightly, and his face was extremely ugly. The people of the other powers all lowered their heads and felt extremely uneasy inside. Some people who are in a bad state of mind, when they feel this sword, feel that their souls are torn apart. Oh, oh, at this moment, the sword in the gap suddenly erupted and destroyed everything. The cracks in the ground continued to expand. In the Keen Palace, the earth was torn apart by the light of the blade, and there was a word. A deep, terrible fissure, the radiance of the sword gradually faded, and the remaining strong blade also gradually disappeared, leaving only a trace of knife scratching, from which, as if it was still faintly able to feel the incomparable radiance, the atmosphere of the sword was already there. The palace is vast, silence is dead. When the Keen King ordered the Donghang army to conquer the thatched hut, the big disciple appeared, and he went straight to the Keen dynasty palace and cut the knife, as if he was the only one here. The strong faces of the Keen dynasty look very bad, especially the King of Keen and Prince of Keen Yu. At this time, Keen Yu's Prince Keen Yu took out a golden dragon weapon, and the sound of the yin dragon sounded faintly, as if the dragon weapon contained a true dragon soul. When the sword is cut, he understands that the sword is further away from him, and the sage understands it deeper than him. If he does not use the sage weapon, he cannot defeat the sword. Long Yin exploded, Keen Yu's body rose to the sky, and there was a real dragon around his body. However, Dao Sheng only glanced at him gently and said, I have no problem if you want to go to war, but how many people here can leave alive? The Sword Saint's words made everyone's hearts tremble violently. Just now, the Sword Saint's blade was unintentional to kill and cut off in the air, but if the war really breaks out, even if it is the result of the sword, it will not. Most people can compete with the sword slash, can kill most of the strong here, and few who can stand it. Sword Princess, threatened by another's life. Keen Yu stared at the sword of the sword, and when they started the war, they could naturally go to the air war. If there was another time, this knife would not have been cut like this, and probably should not have been cut in the Keen dynasty. Dao Sheng faintly opened his mouth, and when his voice fell, he turned and walked away. Accept Keen Yu's challenge. He didn't have time to do boring things. How did the Keen dynasty treat Liu Guo? If the Keen dynasty sends troops to conquer the hut, he will kill the Keen dynasty. Will he also accompany Keen Yu to play the Battle of Lords? You just left. King Keen shouted, watching the back of Dao Sheng. You can try to stay with me, but at your own risk, Dao Sheng replied directly. The Keen King looked at the back, his face was very ugly. From that sword radiance, he even felt that the Sword Saint realm was no longer beneath him. If you really want to forcibly keep the sword, no one can predict the consequences. How many people will die in the Keen dynasty? Keen Yu clenched the dragon gun in his palm and stared at the back, so let the sword go. There was no time for him to think about it. Dao Sheng's figure quickly turned into a black speck and disappeared. The people of all forces are also staring at the back of the sword master, and their hearts are very restless. The swordsmen who are more domineering than they used to be, what will happen if they go to the ancestral gate where they are? No one dared to think. At this time, the momentum of the mountain tsunami not long ago no longer existed, and the Eastern Wilderness Alliance that seemed to form at that moment seemed to be extraordinary, but it was so fragile that it broke in one hit. Chapter 339, Lazy Teacher. The big incident in the Eastern Wasteland, the disciples in the academy were a little restless. They all got the news that there was a party being held in the Keen Palace. If this level of war really breaks out, what will the result be? But there will be a lot of lives lost. However, the hut was quiet as usual. On the other hand, Ye Fusion is not so calm. After all, the source of this incident is because of him. Sister Urshi, I heard that today the Keen Palace will hold a grand event. The King of Keen may order the Eastern Wasteland power for an expedition to the lodge. Ye Fusion asked Zhu Hui, and Sister Urshi was too calm. He was still sitting on the swing at this point. Although beautiful, Ye Fusion has no thoughts at this time. Zhu Hui smiled and looked at Ye Fusion and said, didn't young master give you peace of mind to practice? Don't worry, you can't fight for a while. Ye Fusion scratched his head, slightly confused. How did sister know that she couldn't fight? The Keen dynasty wants to launch Donghang to jointly curb the hut. The teacher is too lazy to find anyone. Who should take care of it? Zhu Gehui asked. Ye Fusion scratched his head, and said, Brother Urshi. I am not free, you still have an older brother. Zhu Hui gave him a white look. Fuyun Janzong insulted his teacher, and the elder brother killed Fuyun Janzong directly. Now a group of people want to conquer the hut, your big brother casually go to any power. All alliances are in vain. The cottage was not Liu Guo. The Keen dynasty did not have absolute confidence in wanting to attract a few people back. Those people are not stupid. It's just that your big brother hasn't been down for too long. And people are always forgetful. Ye Fusion also felt relieved when he heard what the elder sister said. Over the years, the older brother must also progress. In this level of war, unless the army has the confidence to wipe out the hut in one sweep, if the second brother said, "Where did the big brother go?" Who doesn't want to miss a three-pointer on the way? Master now should be able to win over the god of clouds and clouds, right? Ye Fusion asked curiously, and he was bound at that time, and the talent of the Kotang disciples was always more prominent. Master's strength, your three brothers should be the clearest, since he shot and killed Prince Keen, it is also a waste of comfort. Zhu Hui said, perhaps your three brothers are angry with Liu Guo. Oh, Ye Fusion nodded slightly, sighed silently in his heart, Liu Guo is really pitiful, and there is no way to report this revenge. What kind of brother is this? Ye Fusion muttered, and it was the only master in the cottage who had not seen it. Zhu Jui's eyelashes moved, then smiled and said, people like rocks. Like a rock. Ye Fusion didn't understand. Huh. Zhu Jui smiled and nodded, the temperature is very smelly and hard. Who speaks ill of me? In the distance, there seemed to be a sound. Zhu Jui smiled, looked up, and looked somewhere, apparently aware of it. Several figures walked over, and the head of the man was dressed in black. It was a sword sage from the Qin dynasty. Next to him, Luo Fan, Zhu Ye, and Ye Shaoxi were there. Brother, am I wrong? Zhu Jui said with a smile. Okay, you're always right. Dao Sheng said with a smile. There is a gentle feeling in those deep eyes, facing the master and sister, where is the sharpness in the Qin dynasty? Ye Fusion's eyes looked at his appearance. This was the first time he had seen Big Brother and the first time he had seen that the second master had lost his previous strength in front of the Kotang disciples. Both eyes and a simple conversation were given to him. It feels like brother and sister. No matter how many legends there were and what kind of legends they would still look like ordinary people in front of their loved ones. Little Master. Dao Sheng's eyes fell on Ye Fusion's body, and he shouted with a smile. Master brothers. Ye Fusion smiled brightly, and said, I was just chatting with my brother and was wondering what Master brother was like. Now I see that Master brother is handsome, smart, and handsome, with an incomparable style. Quote. Dao Sheng looked at Ye Fusion and blinked, then laughed loudly, no wonder I heard your sister spoiled you so much. Ye Shaoxi next to Dao Sheng was feeling depressed. It was also the first time he had met. How can the gap be so big? I admire this person's shameless level. Sir. At this time, a figure dashed forward, and Bitang Zinga Mimu looked at the legendary thatched cottage, a little nervous, after all, she was the first to see it. I have heard Dongyu say that his teacher has accepted a beautiful little sister, this group of cheap children in the mountain. Dao Sheng smiled and said, Bitang Xinger heard the master praising her red cheeks, and said, I will call my three brothers. Talk, turn around and run away. Fifth, go cook, help fourth, and seventh get some good wine. Zhu Gehui ordered, and everyone nodded to work, and looked at Ye Fusion with envy, and this person is fine. Is brother just came from the Qin dynasty? Zhu Jui asked. Only you are smart. Dao Sheng smiled at Zhu Jui with a smile, I went to the Qin dynasty and came to see you. I have seen several teachers and little sisters for the first time. Ye Fusion next had a small wave in his heart. A word from the master casually went to the Qin dynasty. The clouds were bright and light, but behind them, what kind of waves were extraordinary. The prince of the Qin dynasty, Qin Ji, died at the hands of Jiu Dongyu. The Qin dynasty wanted to conquer the lodge. The disciples of the Tang dynasty traveled to the Qin dynasty. What courage when the heroes of the eastern desert gathered. It seems that the second teacher did not guess wrong, but the brother did not go to another army, but the Qin dynasty. Little brother is still worried that the eastern wasteland will join the army hut, Zhu Hui laughed. Now he should feel relieved. Ye Fusion trembled with a smile, because his elder brother went to the Qin dynasty and came to the cottage without any problems, he obviously settled some things. They don't have the courage to attack the hut directly, but now that the Qin dynasty has declared war, Donghang is afraid that he will not calm down, so be careful. Dao Sheng reminded. Zhu Hui nodded gently, and the hatred was finished. Even if the Qin dynasty did not dare to attack directly, war was inevitable since the Qin dynasty declared war, but he did not dare to directly launch his cards to start the peak battle. Does the teacher have any news? Dao Sheng asked again. Brother, don't you know the teacher, who knows where to gather the beautiful disciples? Zhu Gehui said depressedly, everyone complains that the man is not optimistic about his teacher. Teacher wants to slip, do you expect the third child to see? Dao Sheng said, you don't know how lazy the old man is. Ye Fusion listened to the black line on the side, listened to the second brother and sister chat. What kind of mage is that teacher? Brother, you can be counted as a fair word. Jiu Dongyu's handsome figure came over and glanced at Zhu Hui. Zhu Hui set his eyes aside and couldn't bother him. Watching the two small movements, Dao Sheng smiled and shook his head. You too. How lazy is the teacher? Ye Fusion asked curiously. I only accepted a few such students in total, and I only accepted them regardless of teaching. How lazy are you to tell the teacher? The second teacher faced Ye Fusion, and Ye Fusion was embarrassed. In front of him, there were only 7 disciples in the hut, and they only accepted him. Do not teach. It's really lazy. Many people in the Eastern Wasteland are still thinking about the teacher who wants to unite the Eastern Wasteland. Dao Sheng shook his head and said, if the old man had that spare time, it would be great. Zhu Huai's eyes flickered. Only when he truly understood how lazy his teacher was, did he know how ridiculous Dongting was. How many times have the people in the Eastern Wasteland met the teacher? Where can I understand the realm of the teacher? Jiu Dongyu said lightly. Even the giants of the Eastern Wasteland, who dared to say that they knew the teacher in the hut. The 3 of them were probably the ones who knew the best teachers, and couldn't find anyone all year. Several people chatted, the food and drinks were ready, and the rest of their lives in Lu Langxiu came over. This was the most complete at that time by the Grass Hut disciples since Ye Fusion went up the mountain. The atmosphere is relaxed and comfortable as usual. Everyone in the cottage is a legendary character, but in the cottage, they just seem very ordinary, casual chat. Ellipsis, ellipsis, ellipsis. In the outside world, the arrival of Dao Sheng in the Qin dynasty caused a commotion. Qin dynasty wanted to order the Eastern Wasteland troops to defeat the hut, but in any case, it failed to succeed. Dao Sheng's appearance instantly destroyed the alliance, and no one dared to take such a risk. The sword rays left by Qin Sheng in the Qin palace made him feel that the current state of the sword was capable of standing above the Eastern Wasteland. No matter who wanted to go to the lodge, he had to think about the consequences. Holy revenge is not capable. Of course, although they did not directly send troops to conquer the lodge, Fuyun Janzong and Zhua Wangdian had agreed to form an alliance with the Qin dynasty on the spot. But while these terrorist forces temporarily threatened the existence of the Sword Sage, they did not retreat. A few days later, in the ancient world. In the place of ruins, several academy disciples are training at this time. At this time, a strong figure descends. He is a person of the Qin dynasty. The first person is Qin Li. He waved and directly moved. The academy people surrounded him. Leave cultivation and take it away. Qin Li ordered indifference, and the people of the Qin dynasty immediately shot. The unrelated people trembled in the heart, and the academy disciples were furiously opposed, but soon they were all removed and repaired, and then carried away by the people of the Qin dynasty. Many people trembled. Of course, although the Qin dynasty did not directly send Shushan, it was definitely impossible for them to tolerate Qin Zha's death in vain. War comes without knowing it. Subsequently, the Qin dynasty released the news and asked the academy to hand over Liu Feiang and Liu Shenyu to replace them. The academy was shaking and angry. Of course they understood that Liu Feiang was just an excuse to provoke war. Chapter 340, World Battlefield of Aragon. Naturally, the academy was unable to agree to the Qin dynasty's request, not because of how important Liu Feiang and Liu Shenyu were, but because this was the reason for the Qin dynasty to provoke war. What will they send people? Now that war is declared, it is time to enter the state of war. The academy summoned all the disciples in the ancient and ancient world, and then sent powerful people to join the ancient and ancient world to fight. As a result, the battle between the Qin dynasty and the academy broke out from the ancient and ancient worlds first. For the outbreak of war in the east, it was unexpected. Dosheng went to the Qin dynasty to prevent the main army from forming an alliance with the Qin dynasty. The Qin dynasty did not dare to send troops to destroy the thatched hut, but it was also impossible to stop there. This is a place where disciples of various powers test and fight. The outbreak of battle in the ancient and ancient worlds is undoubtedly the most suitable. On this day, 2 ancient figures descended from the ancient world, above the mountain peak, and descended the mountain. The 2 of them were extremely fast. One was wearing the golden winged Daping wings and was extremely beautiful, and the other was wearing the dark gold winged devil wings and howling. These 2 people are Ye Fusion and the rest of their lives. They had not entered the heaven realm and could only enter the Shuang ancient world, but because of this, there were very few people who could threaten them. The 2 of them walked, heading straight for a place in the wilderness. In the ancient and ancient world, some people stare at them, their eyes can't help but stare. Ye Fusion and the rest of his life. Go to the Qin dynasty residence. Someone said. Ye Fuxian and the rest of his life appeared in the desert ancient world. The goal was clear, and now the Qin dynasty had started a war against the Academy cottage. Many people saw Ye Fuxian and the rest of his life flying from the void, and their hearts were dark, and then they went somewhere. Ye Fuxian defeated Luo Junlin, who was better than the heavens. Now his combat strength is clearly at the heaven level. Those who can defeat him in the ancient world may be hard to find. Many people in the desert city watched the sky fly. Figure said. That's true, but since the Qin dynasty launched a war, is it not ready, and it is impossible to fight Ye Fuxian alone. Yes, the Qin dynasty has a strong foundation, even in the ancient world in the desert. Ye Fuxian and the rest of the life only killed 2 people in the past. I am afraid that they may not be able to take advantage. Everyone was talking, their bodies flashed rapidly, and they followed Ye Fuxian and the rest of his life. The crowd is getting more and more rolling, and it is mighty, heading straight for an area in the center of the deserted city. Here, there is a majestic small palace, which is exactly the residence of the Qin dynasty in the ancient desert. In the void, Ye Fuxian and the rest of his life advance, descending into this small palace. In the small palace, many strong men looked up and stared at the 2 empty figures, not much surprise in their eyes, because the war has started, they are naturally prepared. The Qin dynasty outside the little palace not only did not go to fight Ye Fuxian, but they turned into the small palace and gathered with other powerful people. In the Battle of Choge City, Ye Fuxian revealed the incomparable fighting power of the French nation. Let them go fight Ye Fuxian alone, to the death. Sure enough, the Qin dynasty seems to have been prepared. Looking at the small silent palace, many strong people in the distance quietly said. Looking down from the void, the many powerful Qin dynasties in little palace met. Ye Fuxian and the rest of his life stepped forward, stepped directly into the sky above the small palace, and his cold eyes swept across the people of the Qin dynasty below. The sun and moon are high, water and fire are in harmony, and Ye Fu in the sky are blooming. He is like a sun furnace, burning fire all over the body, burning everything, and it is dazzling. Beside Ye Fuxian, there was a shadow like a demon behind him for the rest of his life. The armor on his body was as sharp as a knife, and such demon wings became sharper and sharper. The rest of his life at this moment was like that of a demon, surrounded by his body. A terrifying dark golden luster. Without a word, the golden winged darping behind Ye Fuxian flew straight to the small palace, without waiting for the other party to fully gather. The 2 walked side by side, their wings flickered, they were very fast, and they swooped down. Behind Ye Fuxian, there seems to be a fire tree, a crackling sound comes out, the vines roll towards the crowd, the Qiantengshu spell, the spell Ye Fuxian practiced a long time ago, but this spell it is a growth spell. The stronger, the stronger. Of course, it has been changed by Ye Fuxian. Above the thick vines, the light of fire and water was dazzling. The strong people of the Qin dynasty saw the vines rolling towards themselves, and several people stood in battle lines. The Emperor Dragon is in full bloom, and the dragon shadow is flying into the sky. However, the vines are endless, instantly occupying the shadow of the true dragon. On the top of the vines, there is an extremely cold chill. The image of the true dragon condenses, and then the golden fire burns and passes, and there is a dazzling character appearing. The real dragon figure that was swallowed by the vine disappeared instantly. For the rest of his life, he was instantly arrogant, he held the dark demon Fangshanhua spear, turned into a domineering demon, and pierced straight from the true dragon figure, tore everything apart. His dark golden pupils were burning with demonic fire, which was anger. Liu Guo's destruction, the meeting between Liu Shenyu and Ye Wuchen all looked at him, and now he finally had a chance to release his anger. Bang! The rest of his life fell from the sky, stepped on the righteous dragon, and the skirmish line below collapsed. Everyone scattered to all sides, surrounding the rest of his life, looking at the burly body indifferently. For the rest of his life, the demon wings trembled, holding Fangshanhua Ji in one direction, and the strong person in front of him sang furiously, and the dragon-like spear rolled forward. Fang Tianhua's spear collided with the spear, the dragon shadow collapsed, the long rifle was broken, and an explosion. The gong Fang Tianhua in the hand of the rest of his life pierced directly into the opponent's body, then lifted him up, and slammed the attacker behind him. Fight on the battlefield, don't fight alone. A person in the small palace continues to run to the side, seeing the wild cries of the rest of the life, the people around the rest of the life spread out and return. They also realized that if they fought a ruthless man head-on for a moment, it would be a stalemate. On the other hand, those who fought with Ye Fuxian were shrouded in magnificent vines. The endless water and fire on the sun and moon poured into the battlefield. The people on the battlefield fought back furiously. A dragon appeared around their bodies, blocking Ye Fusion's attack erosion. Above the sky, around Ye Fusion's body, the endless light of screams and roars gathered around his body, seemingly condensing a powerful spell. The terrifying thunder dragon slowly began to form. The magic thunder dragon swallowed and headed towards the sky. The thunder dragon roared and screamed, destroying everything. Loud noises came out like a storm. The strong people below only felt the paralysis of their bodies, their hearts were shaken, and their battles collapsed. Water and flames rushed over and rolled straight onto their bodies, and then screams kept coming. The figures were enveloped in water and fire, and soon disappeared. The strong people of the Qin dynasty in the small palace rushed here in a panic, and they looked very blue. They did not immediately start, but gathered together in a battle to surround Ye Fusion and his whole body. The imperial dragon walked at the same time. The strength of the powerful people of the Qin dynasty seemed to be resonating, surging and powerful, the dragon bursting and thrilling. Launch the 5 spirits just in case. A strong man shouted. Suddenly, in the small palace, the ground was flowing with a bright light, and the vast and endless space, the aura became extremely violent and gathered wildly. The tremendous pressure came. Ye Fusion looked into the distance, and saw all directions in the small palace, but at the same time there were statues of sacred beasts, terrifying dragons, huge basalt turtles, dazzling phoenixes, huge stone figures and unrivaled, dazzling Jinpeng. The imposition of this statue directly came to Ye Fusion and the rest of his life. At this moment, they seemed to have seen 5 extremely terrible monsters, and the terrible desires of the monsters came straight into their minds. Don't look at it, Ye Fusion said to the rest of his life. He didn't feel the 5 monsters anymore, but even if he didn't feel it, the coercion was still being controlled and suppressed on them made the space heavy. Unmatched. That was when I was training at the Wulianchang Academy. Ye Fusion said again, but this coercion was far more terrible than what he felt in Wulianchang at first. The stone statues above Wulianchang are not so scary, and they are in Wushu. All the battles in the refinery are the same, but now, this coercion is controlled to directly fall on him and the rest of his life, and the strength of the Qin dynasty is not affected. Outside the small palace, countless strong people saw the situation here, their hearts trembled. Ye Fusion and the strength of the rest of his life were not in doubt, but it was a bit impulsive to directly enter the Qin dynasty residence in the ancient world. You should know that the Qin dynasty chose this place as a residence because it was possible to train by relying on the 5 spirits to guard the stone statues and fight. This is a relic, which is directly owned by the Qin dynasty and makes it a small palace. After years of operation, the 2 kill him head-on, putting themselves in danger. Although Dao Sheng came to Qin Palace to scare all the troops to directly curse the hut to start the extermination, but Ye Fusion killed the small palace. Could it be that the Qin dynasty did not kill him? The Qin dynasty had some disturbances, but Doshan Mountain and Kotang were not the same. The 2 sides simply restrained each other. However, the war in the ancient and ancient realms has now completely broken out, and has become a silent battlefield between the 2 sides. Heaven has no way to go, hell has no door to come. In that case, it will be everything to you. The powerful weapon of the Qin dynasty pointed at Ye Fusion and the rest of his life, and spoke coldly, killing the straw disciple. It was quite interesting. Today, those in power in the Qin dynasty wanted Ye Fusion dead, and now, they had finally found such an opportunity. This place is very suitable for spiritual practice. After this, it will no longer belong to the Qin dynasty. Ye Fusion said coldly as if he didn't hear the other party's words.